Hi, it's Ramsey Dewey at the JX Fight Club in Shanghai, China. Today we have a question from Shadow Sucks. You guys and your awesome screen names. Shadow Sucks, he says, Ramsey, I wanted to know, how does a knockout feel? And more importantly, how did you recover from your first knockout? Okay, a couple of things. I've been knocked out a few times in my career. And it's also important to recognize there are different events that are classified as knockouts. All right, first of all, let's talk about a TKO or a technical knockout. A TKO is not what you generally think of as a knockout. Right? The knockout is in being knocked unconscious or put into a short-term coma. Now, I have experienced a TKO, that is when a fighter is deemed by the referee to be no longer able to intelligently defend himself. So, for example, I fought this dude named Brian Prin. He got the takedown. He ended up taking mount. I was unable to escape mount. He started boom, boom, dropping elbows on me. And after taking so many of those, the referee stopped the fight, and rightfully so, because, the dude saved my life on that occasion. So how does a technical knockout feel? It feels kind of embarrassing. It's like, man, I can't improve my position, because you're fully conscious of everything that's happening. You're just unable to do anything about it. Now, actual knockouts where you're knocked unconscious. Again, I've experienced 3 knockouts in my life. The first one was not being knocked unconscious. It's what I would say is the first level of a knockout, where you were knocked down, but you were still fully conscious and you're unable to get back to your feet, at least quickly enough for the referee's approval. This was my first Muay Thai fight. It was a Muay Thai exhibition in a cage. Maybe I'll give you a little clip of it right here. Yeah, check that out. That was my first foray fighting a fellow named Jeff No Mercy Moody, and he knocked me down and out. I was still fully conscious of what happened, but yeah, I was unable to intelligently defend myself, so obviously the referee would have been right to call it a TKO, but since I fell down and was unable to stand up under my own power, well, that's called a knockout. How does that feel? It kind of felt like getting hit by a truck. Now, the next level of knockout is where you are knocked unconscious, that temporary coma that we're talking about. That happened twice. The first time it happened in training. I had a training partner that was not a very good training partner once, and I remember we were grappling, not even sparring, just grappling up in a boxing ring, and I attempted a flying armbar. And as a response to that, he slammed me on my head. I woke up about 30, maybe 40 minutes later on the side of the boxing ring. I was out cold that whole time, and the guy just kept training while I was out. Nobody bothered to attempt to seek medical attention, and what did that feel like? It felt weird. It felt super weird. While I was out, I was off in La La Land dreaming about the weirdest stuff, man. I was dreaming about a refrigerator that became an anthropomorphic refrigerator and started walking around and literally running. You ever hear that stupid joke like, how's it go? Is your refrigerator running? Yeah, better go catch it. Because old-timey refrigerators used to leak water quite a bit. I don't know if the new ones do. But that was going through my head. I was thinking about this actual literal anthropomorphic running refrigerator, and all these crazy events were going on, and it seemed like I was out for years. I mean, these events in this crazy dream just seemed to go on for years on end. And I woke up to find out I was out for like 30 minutes, and that was bizarre, and I was still having a really hard time getting my bearings, like where am I, what's going on. I felt really foggy. And after that, to address the second part of your question, how did I get back to the point where I felt normal again? How exactly did you word that? I'm going to read that one more time. How did I recover from my first knockout? Man, that was damaging psychologically. It really was, because I remember after that, I got really, really careful when fighting. Like really careful. And I was kind of scared of fighting. I mean, more so than usual. Fighting is already scary, but when you have these revelations about your own mortality and how easy it is to just render you unconscious and put you off in la la land if you bang the back of your head on the floor, that is such a sobering thought. So it took a few years before I got back to normal, if you will, and a few more before I surpassed normal. And that's what we want to do, is surpass normal if we want to be successful fighters. Now, my last knockout was also my last fight, the one that put me into retirement. So how did I recover from that? That wasn't just a knockout, that was a compound skull fracture. That was a serious, serious fight, career-ending injury. So the first punch that connected was a hook to the chin, and that chin is the lever that whipped my head around and caused my brain to wobble back and forth and hit the sides of the skull, and that actually rendered me unconscious. The second punch, when I was already down, this one that broke my skull, that one actually woke me up. So I was fully conscious of that happening. Boom, crack, and totally wobbly. And so I was seeing what was happening, couldn't do anything about it, but I wasn't really in a cognizant state of mind. So the next thing I remember, I was backstage in the locker room, and I'm asking my corner man, like, when's it my turn to fight? I'm ready to go. And he's like, sit down, you're knocked out. I've told this story a bunch of times already on this channel. And I experienced some serious memory loss, like all kinds of amnesia from that event. And even to this day, I cannot remember certain events or certain individuals. For example, one of my cornermen, when I saw him, he started talking to me, and I had no clue who he was. This is a guy I had trained with for several years. I had seen on a day-to-day basis at the gym I was at the time. And I still see him from time to time, and I cannot remember his name. He's always like, hey, Ramsey, how's it going? I'm like, hey, you guy. And it's frankly embarrassing. So how does it feel to be knocked unconscious? Well, it doesn't really feel like anything because you're unconscious. It's a similar feeling to being choked unconscious because you don't really remember it. You're not really cognizant of it. So it's kind of funny when I hear people get mad at each other and they're like, I'm going to knock your block off. I'm going to knock you out and teach you a lesson. Nobody learns a lesson from being knocked out. They don't even remember it. That's one of the great ironies of trying to teach people a lesson by knocking them out, because that's a lesson they will not remember. Man. The lasting repercussions of a knockout, such as brain damage or damage to the head or the skull or whatever gets hit and injured, yeah, that you're going to carry with you. One of the reasons that I continue to make YouTube videos today is an attempt to augment my memory, because that was such a sobering experience, basically understanding that you can literally have memories punched out of your head. And when I started remembering this event, it all came back backwards, kind of like that movie Memento. I don't know if you've seen it. Mild spoiler alert. In fact, I think I've even said that same thing before in a video. Deja vu. I don't know if that's just me or the effects of head trauma, but I remembered the events backwards. This guy in the movie remembers the events backwards, and the movie is played in backwards order, chronologically. So, again, part of the reason I make these YouTube videos is to help augment my own memory so that I can look back on these events and recognize, hey, that's me. Those are things I said. I always read through the comments. I always read through the comments that people leave. You know, even though sometimes I get hundreds and hundreds of comments a day. You know, I'll be sitting on the toilet reading through the comments. That's about the only spare time I have to read them, but I do it. I do it. And sometimes I'll have people comment on videos and they'll say something about it and I'll be like, man, I don't even remember what I said here. I'd have to watch this whole 20-minute video to respond to this person. And man, but yeah, memory is such a precious thing, and the many records that are memory, it's not just up here. In fact, if you think it's up here, you think you've solved the hard problem of consciousness, and we haven't. No scientifically sound person has ever claimed to have solved the hard problem of consciousness. I mean, quantum physicists right now are speculating that consciousness is not actually contained at a chemical level or a biological level inside the brain, but rather it's somewhere out there. I don't really know how to explain it. Kind of like cloud computing that we somehow remotely access through the connection between our body and whatever our consciousness is. We have had this tendency as a race, as humans, for the longest time to always compare our mind, our brain, or our consciousness to the highest level of technology that we understand at the time. For example, in the Renaissance period, the mind, the brain, the consciousness was often compared to a series of pneumatic tubes, because that was the highest level of technology that was fairly incomprehensible to the lay person. Today, we tend to compare the brain and the mind and the consciousness to computers, because again, that's the highest level of technology that the average lay person doesn't really understand either. But our mind, it's not a computer. Our brain is not a hard drive with a finite amount of space to it. My younger brother Mark, he's an interesting guy. And I'll get back to knockouts in a while, but he's an interesting guy because I would consider him a memory expert. And he says that memory is like a muscle. If you train it, it will get stronger. If you don't train it, it will get weaker. And the way we train the memory is to memorize things. We have that experience again and again and again of memorizing something and then going back and recollecting that memory again and again and again. And so he took this to an extreme, and so he would take books, like his first big endeavor, he took a church hymnal with like 300 different hymns, songs in it. And he memorized the hymn numbers, the page numbers, and the names of the songs. And you could say, hey, Mark, what is the song on page number 365? And he'd tell you. What's the song on page number 2? What's the song on page number 58? And he'd tell you. And that was pretty impressive, especially if you were in church and you were like, oh man, what page is everybody on? Because I wasn't paying attention when they announced it. But then he took it to the next level, and he memorized the words of each and every song in that book. And then he memorized all these other details of the book. And so you could reference any part, any phrase of this book, and he would be able to give you a textbook, like photographic, eidetic memory type of explanation of whatever. And then he would carry that onto other books and other books. And the more he would do this, the easier it became, to the point where you look at this guy and he's like, man, this guy is like a computer with his memory. Actually, he's better than a computer, because what a computer does, as far as I understand it, in order to access something from its memory, from its hard drive, it essentially has to go through everything that is on that computer until it finds that thing you're looking for. But the human mind, it's different. The human mind is so much different because we do not do that. It is either there or it is not. It's there or it's not. In in a podcast I did just yesterday, or was it the day before? I can't remember. Talking about memory here. Because knockouts and memory, man, this is intimately connected here. I was talking to my friend Kyle. It's a great podcast, one of my favorite out of the 4 that I've done so far. Got another one coming on Monday. And I was talking about Dinosaur Land in Chengdu. No, not Chengdu. Man, I'm blanking on the city. In the podcast, I said the name of the city Dinosaur Land is in. Chengzhou, that's it. And then immediately after, Kyle said, well, what city is that again? And I couldn't remember. And I had just said it. And I was like, man, I'm going to have to go back and watch this video just to remember that thing. But then all of a sudden, boom, it was there again. So I'm not sure exactly how that works, but I do know we don't have to go back line by line by line by line by line like a computer does, rereading that entire hard disk to recall some information, especially if we do what my younger brother Mark did and exercise our memory the same way we exercise those muscles. So back to knockouts. How did I recover from that last one? Well, the knockout itself, that was the easy part. I mean, if you're alive and, you just keep living. The serious damage, the caved-in skull, all that sort of stuff, yeah, that was a much more serious issue. But the knockout itself, oh, man. It caused a blind spot in one of my eyes. I mean, I've got a black floater floating around in my field of vision. And that's something that is permanent. It's always going to be there unless medical science figures out a way to fix it. And if they do, I doubt I'll be able to afford it. But it is what it is. And eyes are fascinating because they're not just camera lenses. Because the lens is screwed up here. But the connection between the mind and the eye is something else entirely. Something else entirely. It's an imaging probability generator. In other words, what we see is your mind's best guess of what will probably happen a fraction of a second in the future. What else came with that knockout? My speech. Since this area right here that was impacted is so close to this frontal lobe that is largely responsible for regulating speech, I experienced some speech problems, and I already had speech problems, man, like cluttering. It's something that runs in my family. It's very similar to stuttering in a lot of ways, but it's more like you have a whole bunch of ideas at once, and you try to get them all out at the same time, which is physically impossible, and it just kind of shuts down the whole process. And so for a clutterer, my older brother Joseph, he's dealt with this, and he found typing was an excellent way to help him to control this, and actually use it to help him in life. Because when you type, you can type in a linear fashion, like once upon a time, this happened, and then this happened, and this happened, and this happened. Left to right, if you're writing in English instead of Hebrew words. Right to left. But the way a clutterer might write is more like a diagram or a chart where you write a little bit here, and you write a little bit there, and you write a little bit here. Then you start reorganizing the thing into a paragraph that makes sense. And I find I do that a lot when I write. It's like I go back and forth and back and forth. I write in a very circular fashion instead of a linear fashion. So one goal I made when I started doing these vlog-style videos on YouTube, and I have to reiterate this, the reason I started a YouTube account in the first place was to help me get better at speaking. And yeah, one goal I gave myself when I made these vlog-style videos was to speak continuously, to not edit myself at all, I know I make some videos where I edit them, where it's, fun, um, like those women's self-defense videos where we try them out, and obviously you gotta edit those. But the vlogs, no, I don't edit these. I don't cut anything out, and I know not everybody is on board with that in this generation where everybody wants to see jump cuts and constant flows of information. And I don't have 20 minutes to watch a video. Well, okay, that's fine. Watch what you want. That's cool. It's your life. I mean, time is all you have at the end of the day. So if this isn't your thing, man, go watch something fun. Watch something funny. Watch something entertaining. And if it is, if you're getting something out of this, if you can relate to this, if this helps you in some way, cool. Great. Man, join me for the journey. And these pauses, man. I love to pause, I love to think, I love the sound of silence. I've had a few angry people in the comment section down below say, this guy loves the sound of his own voice. He's in love with the sound of his own voice. I'm in love with the sound of silence. Not the Simon and Garfunkel song. I mean, that's okay. That's okay. They're an okay band. But I love the sound of silence. Just stop and listen. And just be in that moment. So what does a knockout feel like? It doesn't really feel like anything, to be honest. It's when you wake up that you start feeling and thinking things. It's when you watch that tape over and over and over and over and over and over again, and you beat yourself up worse than that other guy in the cage did to you. You beat yourself up worse than anybody in the comment section on the internet could ever do for you. You tell yourself the most horrible things. You tell yourself, oh, I suck, I don't belong in here, what am I doing? I'm a joke. And then you stop, and you hear the silence again. And you reinvent yourself. You analyze the situation and you realize what could have been, how you could remedy that situation if you were there again, and you go forward with life. And we can't fix the past, but we can do something about what happens next. So when that one door closes, it is up to us to open the next one. And that is it. Thank you for watching. Now get out there and train.